The sun was barely cresting over the manicured lawns of Willow Creek, a suburban enclave where every mailbox matched and every hedge was trimmed to geometric perfection. I'd been up since 4 a.m., holed up in my home office, the kind of setup that looked like a tech geek's fever dream, but was actually a covert hub for federal cybersecurity operations. My name's Lucas Grant, though to the neighbors, I'm just the quiet guy with too many gadgets and a vague job description. IT contractor, I'd say when pressed, which was enough to bore most people into changing the subject. In truth, I'm a federal agent specializing in cyber defense, with a decade of experience writing encryption protocols for agencies that don't officially acknowledge my existence. My current mission was a high-stakes trace of a cyber-terrorist cell, a group of digital phantoms trying to cripple U.S. infrastructure, power grids, water systems, the kind of stuff that keeps society humming. I was closer than I'd been in months, and the key to it all was a private fiber optic line I'd installed under my own lawn. The line wasn't just any cable. It was a custom job, drilled and buried by a crew I'd vetted personally, routed through a fake irrigation control box that looked like it belonged in a gardening catalog. Every bit of data flowing through it was encrypted with a protocol I'd helped the FBI develop, a labyrinth of code so tight even quantum computers would choke on it. The setup was invisible, secure, and, most importantly, mine. It was my lifeline to the digital battlefield, a direct feed to servers that stitched together metadata from intrusions across the Midwest. That morning, as I sipped lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, my second monitor was alive with a perfect breadcrumb trail. Packet sequences danced across the screen, anomaly signatures flagging a network intrusion targeting energy grids in Ohio and Illinois. The algorithm was working overtime, piecing together the movements of a hacker known only as Mole, a ghost who'd been slipping through our nets for years. I was so close I could almost taste the arrest warrant. Then, like a guillotine dropping, the feed went dead. The monitors flatlined. No flicker, no error code, just black. My first thought was a denial of service attack, standard playbook for groups like moles. My fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up diagnostics, checking for packet floods or malicious reroutes. Nothing. The system was clean, but the uplink was gone. My second thought was sabotage, someone physically tampering with the line. That seemed impossible. The setup was too well hidden, too secure. My third thought didn't have time to form because I was already sprinting to the vault room, a reinforced closet disguised as a utility space, where the fiber uplink terminated. The status light was blinking red, a silent scream that something was very, very wrong. I grabbed a flashlight and bolted for the front door, my heart pounding like a war drum. Outside, the morning air was crisp, the kind of suburban quiet where the only sounds were sprinklers and distant lawnmowers. But there, standing on my lawn like a conquering general, was Karen Delicort, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. She was in her mid-50s, with a sun hat tilted crooked from exertion and a smile that could curdle milk. In her hand was a severed black cable, coiled like a trophy snake, its sheared end glinting in the sunlight. Beside her stood a nervous-looking technician in a neon vest, holding a shovel and avoiding eye contact. Karen was mid-lecture, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction as she waved the cable at him. This unauthorized eyesore was polluting our community aesthetics, she declared, as if she'd just saved the neighborhood from a nuclear meltdown. She turned, spotted me, and waved like she'd baked me a pie instead of decapitating my entire surveillance system. I froze, my brain screaming while my face stayed calm. Karen had no idea who I was. To her, I was just Lucas, the guy with the weird antennas and too many Amazon deliveries. She didn't know I was a federal agent, didn't know the cable she'd just cut was a critical node in a national security operation. She thought she'd snipped a rogue Wi-Fi router, some neighbor's attempt at free internet. What she'd actually done was compromise a trace that could have led straight to an active cyber-terrorist cell operating out of Eastern Europe. The irony was thicker than her HOA rulebook. I forced a smile, my jaw so tight it ached, and stepped forward. "Morning, Karen," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my head. "What's going on?" She puffed out her chest, the severed cable dangling like a scalp. "Lucas, I'm so glad you're here to see this. We've been cracking down on unapproved installations, and this," she shook the cable, "was sticking out of your irrigation box, completely against Section 14b.3 of the HOA covenants. No exposed tech infrastructure within 25 feet of a visible landscape line." She beamed, oblivious to the fact that she'd just committed what could be classified as a felony. "I spotted it last week when I was inspecting your flower bed. Rules are rules, you know? We have to protect the visual harmony of our community." Visual harmony. The phrase hit me like a slap. I wanted to scream that her obsession with lawn aesthetics had just cost me a lead on one of the most wanted digital threats on the FBI's radar. I wanted to tell her that the eyesore she'd butchered was a lifeline to preventing blackouts across half the Midwest. Instead, I nodded, my hands shoved in my pockets to keep them from shaking. "That's my private property, Karen," I said, keeping my tone even. "It's not just some random cable." Her eyes narrowed, but her smile didn't waver. "Not if it violates aesthetic codes," she chirped, like she was quoting scripture. "I'm sorry, Lucas, but we can't have rogue tech cluttering up the neighborhood. It's suspicious, honestly. All that gear you've got, satellite dishes, antennas, that giant breaker box by your garden. No one even knows what you do for work." She tilted her head, her sun hat slipping further, and I realized she wasn't just enforcing rules. She was fishing, testing me, maybe even enjoying the power trip. "I'm a contractor," I said, sticking to my cover story. "IT systems, encryption consulting. Freelance." It was the same line I'd fed every nosy neighbor for years, vague enough to deflect, but believable enough to blend in. Karen's lips pursed, like she didn't buy it but didn't have the ammo to push further. "Well," she said, turning to the technician, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, "maybe you should consult with the HOA before you rewire half the block." She gave me a final wink, tucked her clipboard under her arm, and waddled off, leaving the technician to scoop up the cable's remains and disappear into his van. I stood there, staring at the churned-up patch of lawn where my lifeline had been. The fiber was high-grade, military spec, designed to withstand everything from floods to EMPs. But it hadn't survived Karen Delicort and her crusade for symmetrical hedges. I knelt by the irrigation box, my fingers brushing the scorched end of the cable. It wasn't cut with garden shears or a shovel. The edge was too clean, the surrounding plastic slightly melted. That was a precision heat cutter, the kind used by professional landscapers or, in the wrong hands, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The thought sent a chill down my spine. Either Karen had stumbled into a federal operation by dumb luck, or someone had pointed her at that cable, knowing just enough to make her feel like a hero. Back inside, I locked the door and sank into my office chair, the dead monitors staring back like accusing eyes. The trace was gone. Mole's digital shadow had vanished into the ether, and the clock was ticking. I pulled up the backup logs, but they were useless without the live feed. An hour earlier, I'd been watching the algorithm close in, the metadata flags forming a map that could have pinned the cell's location to a single server rack. Now it was all static. I slammed my fist on the desk, the coffee mug rattling. 10 years in cyber defense, 3 federal agencies on my resume, NATO briefings under my belt, and I'd been undone by a suburban dictator with a laminated badge. But Karen wasn't just a busybody with a vendetta against tech. Something about her smugness, her precision, her insistence on visual harmony felled off. I'd dealt with HOAs before, petty tyrants who loved their little fiefdoms, but this was different. She targeted my setup with surgical accuracy, and her rhetoric about rogue tech sounded rehearsed, like she was parroting someone else's script. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and replayed her words. "Suspicious," she'd said. "No one knows what you do." That wasn't just HOA meddling. That was a probe. I stood and paced the room, my mind racing. The cable was dead, but I wasn't. I had backups, Redundancies, a mobile uplink in the garage disguised as a tool van. I could rebuild the trace, reconnect with the Bureau, and get back on Mole's trail. But first, I needed to know how deep this went. Karen had crossed a line, and whether she knew it or not, she'd stepped into my world. I wasn't just going to fix the connection. I was going to find out why she'd targeted me, who, if anyone, was pulling her strings, and what kind of game she was playing in Willow Creek. I opened the vault room again, checking the secondary systems. The emergency uplink was still green, a quantum-encrypted relay that could bypass any local interference. I activated it, sending a ping to FBI headquarters. The response was immediate. "Grant, what happened?" I typed back, choosing my words carefully. "Physical cable severance by unauthorized third party. HOA president, civilian." No clue what she just did. There was a pause, then, "Proceed with caution. Reconstruct if possible." And Grant? Next time, don't build critical infrastructure under your rhododendrons. I disconnected, a grin smile tugging at my lips. The Bureau didn't know the half of it. Karen Delicort wasn't just a nuisance. She was a wild card, and wild cards in my line of work were dangerous. I opened a hidden panel in the vault, revealing a sleek array of tools disguised as household junk, a signal jammer posing as a smoke detector, a data interceptor built into a thermostat. If Karen thought cutting one cable was going to stop me, she was about to learn a hard lesson. I wasn't just a neighbor. I was the guy who watched the watchers, and now I was watching her. The rest of the morning, I worked fast. I rerouted residual data through the mobile uplink, salvaging what I could from the morning's trace. It wasn't enough to rebuild the trail, but it gave me a starting point. Mole was still out there, and every second Karen had cost me was a second he could use to burrow deeper. But I couldn't focus on him yet, not until I understood the threat standing on my lawn. I pulled up the HOA's public records, cross-referencing Karen's name with local permits and vendor contracts. Nothing stood out, but that didn't mean she was clean. People like Karen didn't get to her level of control without leaving a trail, emails, payments, maybe a shady deal with a tech firm posing as a landscaping company. I stepped outside again, this time with a cover story. I grabbed a rake and started poking around the irrigation box, making it look like I was cleaning up her mess. The neighbors were starting to stir, walking dogs or grabbing their mail, and I needed to blend in. Across the street, Greg, a guy who'd once asked me to fix his router, waved cautiously. "Heard Karen went full vigilante on your lawn," he called. "You okay?" I shrugged, leaning on the rake. "Just another day in paradise." "She say anything to you about my setup?" Greg shook his head. "Nah, but she's been on a tear about tech clutter all month. Finding people for smart doorbells even. You ask me, she's got too much time on her hands." He wasn't wrong, but time wasn't Karen's only asset. She had authority, a committee of loyalists, and a knack for making people afraid to push back. I thanked Greg and went back to work, my mind churning. The heat cutter bothered me. It wasn't standard HOA gear. Most presidents would have called a meeting, sent a strongly worded letter, maybe slapped me with a fine. Cutting a buried cable with professional-grade tools was next level, even for a control freak like Karen. I needed to know where she'd gotten it, who'd shown her how to use it, and whether she'd been pointed at my lawn by someone who knew what that cable was. By noon, I'd mapped out a plan. Step 1. Rebuild the uplink without drawing attention. Step 2. Dig into Karen's network, both digital and social. Step 3. Figure out if she was a pawn or a player. I wasn't naive enough to think she'd masterminded a cyber-terrorist cover-up, but I'd seen enough to know that people like her, petty, power-hungry, convinced of their own righteousness, were perfect tools for bigger schemes. Someone could have fed her just enough tech jargon to make her feel like a crusader, pointed her at my rogue cable, and let her do the rest. If that was the case, I wasn't just up against Karen Delicort. I was up against whoever was using her, and they were playing a game I knew all too well. As I worked, the neighborhood hummed along, oblivious to the war brewing under its surface. Kids rode bikes, sprinklers hissed, and somewhere, Karen was probably drafting her next HOA newsletter, crowing about her victory over my eyesore. She didn't know it yet, but she'd just picked a fight with the wrong neighbor. I wasn't going to let her slide, and I wasn't going to let Mole slip away again. This was my turf, my mission, and my line in the sand. Karen wanted to play suburban sheriff? Fine. I'd show her what it meant to cross a federal agent. And when I was done, she'd wish she'd stuck to policing mailboxes. The sun was high in Willow Creek by the time I finished rerouting the emergency uplink from my garage. The mobile relay, disguised as a beat-up tool van, hummed quietly behind a stack of old paint cans, its quantum-encrypted signal pinging FBI headquarters with a grim update. The trace on Mole was cold, thanks to Karen Delicort's lawn-mowing crusade. I leaned back in my office chair, the dead monitors still mocking me, and let the weight of the morning settle. Karen wasn't just a nuisance, she was a walking disaster, a suburban tyrant who'd stumbled into a federal operation and blown it to pieces. But as I stared at the blinking red light on my backup console, a new question gnawed at me. Was she really just stumbling? Her smugness, the precision of that heat cutter, the way she'd zeroed in on my cable, it felt too clean, too deliberate. I'd spent a decade chasing digital ghosts. I knew a setup when I smelled one. And Karen's little HOA power trip was starting to reek. I cracked my knuckles and pulled up the HOA's public records on my laptop, a side monitor running a passive scan of local Wi-Fi signals. Karen Delicort wasn't going to slip away with a wink and a clipboard. If she was more than a meddling busybody, there'd be a trail, emails, payments, maybe a shady vendor contract buried in the fine print of her signal purity campaign. The HOA's website was a pastel nightmare, all stock photos of smiling families and buzzwords like community harmony. But buried in the meeting minutes, I found gold. Karen had pushed through a new tech oversight committee 6 months ago, claiming it was to streamline digital infrastructure. The committee's vendor? A company called HomeSphere, a name that sent a jolt down my spine. I'd flagged them 2 years ago on a bureau case, private data firm, notorious for harvesting behavioral patterns from suburban networks under the guise of smart grid optimization. They were slick, slippery, and always one step ahead of regulation. If Karen was in bed with them, this wasn't just about my cable. This was a data heist, and Willow Creek was the mark. I leaned closer to the screen, my coffee long forgotten. HomeSphere's public-facing site was all corporate fluff, promises of seamless connectivity, and community-driven tech solutions. But I knew their MO. Infiltrate HOAs, install proprietary hardware, and siphon everything from Wi-Fi traffic to smart thermostat logs. They've been linked to misinformation campaigns, voter profiling, even low-grade industrial espionage. The Bureau had never pinned them down, but their fingerprints were all over Karen's rhetoric. Tech clutter, signal harmony, rogue installations, it was like she'd swallowed their marketing deck whole. I opened a secure terminal and ran a deep dive on HomeSphere's recent filings. Within minutes, I had a hit. A subsidiary, Smart Suburb Solutions, had signed a contract with Willow Creek's HOA 3 months ago. The scope? Neighborhood-wide frequency management. Translation: they were wiring the place for surveillance, and Karen was their cheerleader. I stood and paced the room, my mind racing. Karen wasn't just cutting cables for kicks. She was enabling a data grab, either knowingly or as a useful idiot. The heat cutter flashed in my memory, too precise for a random HOA vendetta. Someone had equipped her, maybe even pointed her at my lawn. I needed to know how deep she was in, and fast. Mole's trail was fading, but if HomeSphere was involved, they could be a bigger threat than a single hacker. A company like that didn't just collect data for fun. They sold it, weaponized it, used it to manipulate everything from elections to stock markets. And Willow Creek, with its affluent families and tech-heavy homes, was a goldmine. I grabbed my phone and texted Greg, the neighbor who'd tipped me off about Karen's tech crackdown. "You got a copy of those HOA fines she's been handing out?" I typed. Greg was a solid guy, a mechanic who'd lived here longer than me and had no love for Karen's regime. His reply came fast. Yeah, got one for my mesh router. $200 for unapproved signal overlap. Want me to swing by? I told him to come over, then pulled up the HOA's Covenant PDF. Section 14b.3, the rule Karen had quoted, was real, no exposed tech within 25 feet of a landscape line, but it was vague, a catch-all she'd weaponized. The fines, though, were new. Greg's wasn't the only one. Mrs. Cruz, the quiet widow down the street, had been hit for unauthorized signal splitting. An elderly couple got a warning for their smart sprinklers' acoustic distortion. Acoustic distortion? It was nonsense, pseudoscientific jargon designed to scare people into compliance. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules, she was building a surveillance state, one citation at a time. Greg showed up 10 minutes later, his work boots scuffing the porch. He handed me a folded notice, the HOA logo embossed like it was the Declaration of Independence. "She's lost it, man," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Last week, she told me my router was disrupting neighborhood frequency harmony." I thought she was joking, but then this came. I scanned the fine. It cited electromagnetic clutter and demanded he submit his router for compatibility testing by the HOA's tech vendor. There it was again. Smart Suburb Solutions, a HomeSphere front. I handed the paper back, my jaw tight. She's not joking, Greg. She's got a partner, and they're not here to fix your Wi-Fi. His eyes narrowed. You think she's up to something? Like, what spying? I shrugged, keeping my tone casual. Maybe. All I know is she cut my cable this morning, and it wasn't just for aesthetics. You hear anything about this tech vendor she's pushing? Greg scratched his beard, thinking. Not much, but she's got a booth at the park now. Scanning devices, handing out flyers about signal purity. People are pissed, but no one wants to fight her. She's got the board wrapped around her finger. I nodded, filing it away. Thanks, man. Keep your router off her radar, yeah. He grinned. Already hid it in the attic. Let her try to find me now. After Greg left, I headed to the garage where my real work waited. The mobile uplink was live, but I needed more. I activated Protocol Drift Wire, a passive surveillance suite built into the garage's upper framing, disguised as insulation panels. It was bleeding-edge tech, the kind the Bureau didn't even list in its budget. With a few keystrokes, it started scanning the street for signal anomalies, pinging every device within a 500-yard radius. Karen's house was my first target. Her phone, tablet, and a clunky Wi-Fi booster by her patio all lit up like Christmas lights. I mapped her network footprint in under an hour, and that's when I found it. A ping from an encrypted relay, low output, irregular, buried behind spoofed IDs. It wasn't a commercial device. It was a third-party frequency monitor, the kind used by data firms to siphon traffic without leaving a trace. Either Karen was working with HomeSphere knowingly, or she was a pawn feeding data to someone else without a clue. I leaned back, the garage's fluorescent light buzzing overhead. This was bigger than I'd thought. HomeSphere wasn't just harvesting Wi-Fi logs, they were running a full-spectrum suite, probably pulling audio pings, thermal maps, even behavioral patterns. And Karen was their gatekeeper, waving her HOA badge while they turned Willow Creek into a petri dish. I needed to get closer, see what she was pushing at that park booth. I grabbed a faded dad shirt, a pair of sandals, and a Bluetooth grill thermometer that doubled as a data interceptor. If Karen was playing tech cop, I'd play dumb neighbor. But first, I had to blend in. The park was a short walk, all manicured grass and HOA-approved benches. Karen's booth was impossible to miss, a pop-up tent with a banner screaming Neighborhood Signal Purity Initiative. She was there, in a tracksuit and visor, handing out glossy flyers like it was a political campaign. A small crowd milled around, some curious, others visibly annoyed. I hung back, pretending to check my phone, and watched her work. She was in her element, lecturing a young couple about their smart doorbell's frequency interference. The husband looked like he wanted to bolt, but Karen's voice had that commanding chirp that made people freeze. "We're protecting the community," she said, thrusting a flyer at them. "Too many rogue devices are clogging our signals. Wi-Fi overlap, router congestion. It's chaos. Some homes even have amplifiers. Can you believe that?" I could believe it because I was one of them. My encrypted node was probably the loudest signal in Willow Creek, and Karen's radar was locked on it. I stepped closer, grabbing a flyer from the stack. It was overdesigned garbage, loaded with buzzwords like electromagnetic clutter and aesthetic integrity. Half the terms didn't even make sense, pure technobabble meant to sound authoritative. But buried in the fine print was the real kicker. All non-standard tech must be submitted for compatibility testing by Smart Suburb Solutions, the HOA's approved vendor. There it was, in black and white. HomeSphere was using Karen to strong-arm residents into handing over their devices, and she was eating it up. I caught her eye, and she beamed, oblivious to the fact that she'd gutted my operation hours earlier. "Lucas, good to see you taking an interest. Did you get the memo?" Her voice was syrupy, like we were old pals. I held up the flyer, keeping my expression neutral. "Just catching up. Signal purity, huh? Sounds intense." She nodded, leaning in like she was sharing a secret. "Oh, it's critical. We're also looking into tech-based trespassing, drones, covert cameras. We don't want Big Brother watching, right?" My brain nearly short-circuited from the irony. Here she was, preaching about privacy while funneling data to a company that made Big Brother look like an amateur. I nodded, gripping the flyer tighter. "Right. No spying. Gotta keep things clean." She winked and turned to her next victim, leaving me to slip away. Back home, I tore into the flyer's subtext. The signal purity pitch was a front, a way to scare people into compliance, while HomeSphere's hardware infiltrated their homes. I ran a quick search on Smart Suburb Solutions public filings. The company was a shell, its board a mix of HomeSphere execs and local proxies. They'd locked down contracts with 3 other HOAs in the county, all under the same frequency management pretext. Willow Creek was just the start, a pilot for a broader mesh network that could blanket entire suburbs in surveillance. I needed to get inside Karen's operation, and that meant going to the source. The HOA's next meeting was a mandatory community cookout at the park gazebo, a classic Karen move, cloak her power grab in burgers and small talk. I RSVP'd online, marking myself as attending to avoid suspicion. Then I prepped my gear. The Bluetooth thermometer was my ace, capable of syncing to any device within 10 feet and extracting app data in real time. I'd play the disinterested neighbor, flip some patties, and get close enough to Karen's iPad to see what she was hiding. If she was HomeSphere's admin, her device would be the key to their network. The cookout was a tense affair, the gazebo strung with fairy lights that did little to mask the undercurrent of resentment. Neighbors grumbled as they lined up for food, their eyes darting to Karen's booth, where her committee was inspecting routers under the guise of technical assessments. I stationed myself at the grill, the thermometer clipped to my belt, and kept my movements slow, deliberate. Karen was in full dictator mode, working the crowd with her clipboard and a sash that read Digital Cleanliness Ambassador. She set her iPad on the picnic table next to the mustard, a rookie mistake. I flipped a burger, leaned in to grab a bun, and synced the thermometer to her device. The data stream started flowing, emails, app logs, and Jackpot, a white-labeled control interface for a HomeSphere access node. I froze, the spatula hovering over the grill. HomeSphere wasn't just a vendor, they were running the show. The interface showed Karen had admin-level access, with logs of neighborhood scans at 2 a.m. for AM, pulling audio pings, thermal maps, even power usage patterns. My house was on the list, flagged for high-bandwidth anomalies. She wasn't just finding people, she was profiling them, feeding HomeSphere a real-time feed of Willow Creek's digital life. I extracted the data and disconnected before she noticed, my heart pounding. Karen was either complicit or clueless, but either way, she was the linchpin. I needed to take her down, and fast. Back home, I parsed the data packet, my monitors glowing with the ugly truth. Karen's iPad had authorized regional scans across 4 neighborhoods, including ours. HomeSphere was building a mesh network using HOA partnerships to slip their hardware into homes under the guise of optimization. The logs showed they weren't just collecting tech specs, they were tracking habits, schedules, even how long smart speakers stayed active. It was a surveillance dragnet, and Karen's signal purity crusade was the perfect cover. I leaned back, the weight of it sinking in. This wasn't about my cable anymore. This was about a company weaponizing suburbia and a woman too drunk on power to see the strings. I needed to move carefully. HomeSphere had deep pockets and deeper connections, lawyers, lobbyists, maybe even a mole of their own. But Karen was the weak link. Her ego, her need to control, made her sloppy. I started building a profile, cross-referencing her HO emails with HomeSphere's public activity. She'd been in contact with a smart suburb rep for months, exchanging memos about community tech standards. One email mentioned a pilot program with a cryptic reference to enhanced resident insights. It was vague, but it screamed HomeSphere's playbook: promise efficiency, deliver surveillance. Karen had bought it hook, line, and sinker, or she'd been paid to look the other way. Either way, she was in over her head. The neighborhood was cracking under her reign. Greg texted me later that night. She fined Mrs. Cruz again. $150 for her smart fridge. People are losing it. I replied, hang tight. She's not untouchable. But I knew it wasn't enough to just expose her. I needed proof, something undeniable, something that would make Willow Creek turn on her. The cookout had given me the data, but I needed leverage, a way to catch her in the act. I opened a secure line to Sasha Tran, a freelance journalist I'd worked with on a municipal surveillance case. She was fearless, with a knack for turning dry evidence into viral headlines. Got something for you, I typed. HOA leader tied to a data mining firm. Big players, big stakes. You in? Her reply was instant. Send it. This could be huge. I didn't send everything, not yet. I needed to tighten the net, make sure Karen couldn't wiggle out. But as I stared at the HomeSphere interface on my screen, one thing was clear: Karen Delicort wasn't just a problem. She was a threat, a front for a company that saw suburbia as a playground. And if she thought her sun hat and HOA badge made her invincible, she was about to learn what happens when you cross a federal agent with a grudge. I wasn't just going to stop her. I was going to burn her operation to the ground, and HomeSphere with it. The glow of my monitors cast long shadows across the garage as I finalized the trap. It was past midnight, and Willow Creek was asleep, oblivious to the digital war brewing under its pristine lawns. Karen Delicort had crossed a line. Her HOA crusade wasn't just a power trip, it was a front for HomeSphere, a data mining firm sinking its claws into suburbia. Her iPad, carelessly left on a picnic table at the community cookout, had given me the key, admin access to a surveillance network pulling everything from Wi-Fi logs to thermal maps. She was either a willing accomplice or a clueless pawn, but either way, she'd handed HomeSphere the keys to Willow Creek's private lives. My severed fiber optic line, the one she'd smugly cut with a precision heat cutter, was just collateral damage in her quest for signal purity. But I wasn't collateral. I was Lucas Grant, federal cybersecurity agent, and I was done playing nice. Karen wanted a clean neighborhood? I'd give her one scrubbed of her influence and HomeSphere's tentacles. The trap was set, and it was time to spring it. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of the mobile uplink in my disguised tool van a steady reminder that I was still in the game. The trace on Mole, the cyber-terrorist I'd been hunting, was cold, but HomeSphere was a bigger fish. Their mesh network, enabled by Karen's HOA tyranny, wasn't just spying. It was a systemic play, a blueprint for turning suburbs into data farms. I'd already pulled enough from her iPad to know they were scanning at odd hours, mapping behaviors, even flagging my house for high-bandwidth anomalies. My job was to protect critical infrastructure, and right now, Willow Creek was as critical as any power grid. I opened a secure terminal and checked the honeypot I'd built, a fake Wi-Fi network called Community Uplink Test 42. To the outside world, it was just another signal cluttering the airwaves. Inside, it was a digital landmine packed with decoy metadata, tracking beacons, and a synthetic profile posing as a rogue contractor running a black market streaming network. It was the kind of bait HomeSphere couldn't resist: juicy, illegal-looking, and poorly protected. Except it wasn't. Every bite was laced with hooks that would trace anyone who touched it. I sipped a cold beer, the garage's fluorescent light buzzing like a distant wasp. The trap had taken 2 days to build, a meticulous blend of code and deception. I'd embedded a worm that would expand inside HomeSphere's servers, mapping their access logs, decrypting metadata, and tying Karen's credentials to their operation. If they bit, I'd have a roadmap of their entire network, from Willow Creek to the 3 other HOAs they'd infiltrated. But I wasn't stopping there. Karen's ego was her weakness. She loved the spotlight, loved being the HOA's untouchable queen. I'd use that against her, expose her in front of the neighbors she'd bullied, and let her own arrogance bury her. The plan was simple: light the fuse with the honeypot, feed the fallout to Sasha Tran, my journalist contact, and then detonate the final blow at the HOA's town hall. By the time I was done, Karen would be a pariah, and HomeSphere would be scrambling to dodge federal subpoenas. The honeypot went live at 2 a.m., a faint signal pulsing from a disguised antenna in my attic. I watched the monitors, my fingers drumming the desk. Karen was out there, oblivious, probably dreaming of her next HOA citation. She'd turned the park entrance into a surveillance checkpoint, her signal purity committee, scanning devices at random. She'd even cited a teenager's GoPro drone for satellite harmonic interference, a phrase so absurd it could have come straight from HomeSphere's marketing team. The neighborhood was fraying. Anonymous complaints flooded the HOA's feedback site, only to vanish hours later, scrubbed by Karen or her loyalists. I archived screenshots of every deleted post, building a dossier of her censorship. People were angry, but they were scared. Karen's reign had them second-guessing their own routers, wondering if their smart fridges were next on her hit list. That fear was my leverage. If I could turn it into outrage, she'd be finished. 72 hours after the honeypot went live, my monitors lit up. A bot from an IP tied to a HomeSphere relay server pinged the fake network, once to check its signature, then again to route it to a secondary address in Dallas, masked behind multiple VPNs. My beacons fired back, tunneling through their defenses. They'd taken the bait, flagging the network as a potential goldmine. I leaned forward, adrenaline spiking. This was it, the moment they showed their hand. I created a fake login event, making it look like the rogue contractor was uploading schematics of HOA community layouts, the kind of data HomeSphere craved for their optimization algorithms. 30 minutes later, a deeper packet inspection hit, pulling the entire archive. My worm went with it, a silent predator slipping into their servers. It would spread like digital fog, mapping their infrastructure, identifying admins, and linking Karen's tablet to the chain of command. By sunrise, I had the map. Karen's iPad had authorized a dozen regional scans, not just in Willow Creek, but across 3 other counties. She had multi-tier clearance, the kind no suburban HOA president should ever have. Whether she knew what she was doing or was just drunk on HomeSphere's promises, she was their linchpin, a willing conduit for their surveillance. I cross-referenced the logs with her HOA emails, finding a trail of correspondence with a Smart Suburb Solutions rep. One memo mentioned a pilot program with enhanced resident insights, a euphemism for spying. Another hinted at a financial incentive, a community fund tied to compliance metrics. Karen wasn't just a pawn. She was getting paid, or at least promised something shiny enough to keep her loyal. I sent the initial data packet to Sasha, keeping my identity vague. HOA leader complicit in data harvesting, I wrote. Tied to HomeSphere, known for overreach. I've got logs, credentials, and a paper trail. You want the story, it's yours. Give me 48 hours to lock it down. Her reply was immediate. This is dynamite. I'm in. Get me everything. I grinned, the first real smile in days. Sasha was a bulldog. Once she sank her teeth into a story, she didn't let go. But I wasn't handing her the full package yet. I needed one more piece, undeniable proof that would make Karen's downfall public and permanent. The HOA town hall was 3 days away, a packed meeting where Karen would hold court under her digitally clean, visually pristine banner. It was the perfect stage. I'd attend, play the frustrated neighbor, and hit her with evidence she couldn't deny. But first, I needed to tighten the trap. I tweaked the honeypot, adding a fake data leak that looked like the rogue contractor was selling HOA resident profiles, names, habits, power usage. It was catnip for HomeSphere, and sure enough, their servers pinged again, pulling the bait into a deeper analysis sweep. My worm expanded, pulling internal metadata that confirmed Karen's tablet as a regional admin hub. She wasn't just enabling scans, she was greenlighting them, signing off on every ping that swept Willow Creek's backyards at 4 a.m. Meanwhile, Karen's campaign was escalating. She'd issued more fines. Greg got another for his unreviewed mesh system, Mrs. Cruz for her smart thermostat's signal bleed. Even the elderly couple down the block was cited for their sprinklers' frequency clutter. The citations were piling up, each one a power play to force compliance with HomeSphere's hardware. I intercepted a flyer from her red wagon, now a staple of her door-to-door patrols. It was bolder than the last, demanding residents register all devices with the HOA or face escalated penalties. The language was pure HomeSphere, technical enough to intimidate, vague enough to cover anything. I scanned it into my system, adding it to the dossier. Karen was building a digital fiefdom, and she thought she was untouchable. I wasn't the only one noticing. Greg cornered me at the mailbox, his face tight. She's out of control, Lucas. Cited my kid's gaming console yesterday. Said it was emitting unapproved pulses. I'm ready to lawyer up. I nodded, keeping my voice low. Don't escalate yet. She's digging her own grave. Just keep your gear off her radar. He sighed, but I saw the spark in his eyes. Greg wasn't alone, others were whispering, venting in private group chats that Karen's bots hadn't yet infiltrated. I archived those too, building a case not just against her, but against the fear she'd weaponized. The night before the town hall, Karen made her fatal mistake. She hosted a live stream from her living room, a self-congratulatory tutorial on setting up an HOA-approved smart home. She was all smiles, showing off her router, her tablet, her Signal Purity app. For 2 seconds, her iPad screen flashed an admin panel, HomeSphere's logo, resident profiles, scan logs, all in plain view. I was watching, recording, my heart pounding as I captured the frame. It was the smoking gun, Karen, live on camera, exposing her role as HomeSphere's gatekeeper. I froze the clip, enhanced the resolution, and sent it to Sasha with a note. This is the kill shot. Hold it until I say go. Sasha's reply was a single emoji, a firecracker. She was ready, but I needed the town hall to seal the deal. I spent the day prepping, loading a projector remote with the clip and syncing it to a portable drive. I'd walk in as Lucas the neighbor, not Lucas the agent, and let Karen's own words bury her. The neighborhood was buzzing. Sasha's article was set to drop at noon the next day, time to hit just as the town hall reached fever pitch. I'd feed the crowd's anger, show the clip, and watch Karen implode. HomeSphere would be next, their servers already compromised by my worm, their logs ready for the FBI's cybercrime division. The town hall was a circus. The clubhouse was packed, standing room only, the air thick with tension and cheap coffee. Neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder, whispering about Sasha's article, which had gone live hours earlier. HOA president linked to data mining firm accused of spying on residents. It was viral by 2 p.m., picked up by local news, trending on Reddit with screenshots of Karen's admin login. A TikTok parody of her Signal Harmony speech was racking up views, auto-tuned into a mocking anthem. People called her the router queen, and the name stuck. Karen walked in late, flanked by her committee, her silk blouse screaming money, but her face a mask of strain. Her cheek twitched, her eyes darting as she took the podium. "Let's begin," she said, her voice tight. "There's been noise, but I want to clear the air." Greg didn't wait. His hand shot up, his voice cutting through the room. "Clear the air? You mean the part where you handed our router data to a surveillance company?" The crowd erupted, whispers turning to shouts. Karen's smile faltered, but she waved him off. "Misinformation," she started, but Mrs. Cruz interrupted, her voice firm. "Did you authorize device scans? I saw my usage data in that article, and I don't even have a smart speaker." Another man shouted, "Why were you tracking my garage at 2 a.m.? Laughter and gasps followed, the room turning on her like a tide. I stepped forward, the projector remote in my hand, my voice calm but deliberate. "Since transparency's the goal, I've got some community footage to share, including a public live stream where Karen exposed her access to HomeSphere's admin panel." Her face went white. She lunged, nearly toppling her chair. "That's fake. You can't show that. It's illegal." But the screen lit up, her iPad's dashboard filling the room. The HomeSphere logo glowed, her login credentials unmistakable. The crowd went silent, then exploded, shouting, filming, one guy laughing so hard he snorted. Karen tried to storm the projector, tripped over a cord, and stumbled into the podium, cameras clicking like vultures. "This is entrapment," she shrieked, pointing at me. "You set me up. Who are you?" I straightened, the room hanging on my words. "I'm the guy who patched your surveillance hole before a class action lawsuit could. The guy who traced the signal you gave to a data farm in Dallas. The guy keeping this neighborhood's data from being sold to profiling companies." I didn't say FBI, it wasn't needed. The implication landed hard. Karen froze, mascara smearing, her committee abandoning her like rats from a sinking ship. The vice president stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I'm calling an emergency vote to suspend Karen Delicort as HOA president, effective immediately." Hands shot up, some clapping, the room a wave of relief and rage. Karen tried one last plea. "I was protecting the community. You don't understand how dangerous unchecked tech is." But no one listened. She was escorted out, disgraced, her reign shattered. I slipped to the back, my cover intact, the projector remote still warm in my pocket. Outside, I pinged the FBI with the worm's final logs. HomeSphere servers were exposed, their admins flagged, a federal warning already in motion. Sasha's article was everywhere, and Willow Creek was free for now. But I wasn't done. Karen was the face, HomeSphere the muscle, and someone else was pulling the strings. I'd find them, because if Karen taught me anything, it's that tyranny hides in plain sight, and I was the guy who burned it down. The dust settled over Willow Creek like a quiet fog, the kind that softens the edges of a neighborhood after a storm. It was 2 weeks since the town hall, since Karen Delacorte's reign as HOA president crumbled under the weight of her own arrogance and a projector screen flashing her HomeSphere admin login. The clubhouse, once her throne room, was now just a meeting space again, its cheesy banners replaced with twinkle lights for a potluck hosted by Lorraine, the interim president. Lorraine was a retired teacher, proudly analog by nature, who'd swept in like a breath of fresh air. Her first act was to void every fine. Karen's Signal Purity Committee had issued hundreds of dollars in penalties for smart fridges, mesh routers, even sprinklers, all erased with a single board vote. Her second was to rip out every trace of HomeSphere's tech, the clubhouse router, the fake signal analyzers on light poles, the smart scanner at the park entrance. Gone, like they'd never existed. The potluck was a celebration of that freedom, neighbors laughing under the stars, passing plates of potato salad and cold beers, no surveillance drones humming overhead. I stood at the edge of the crowd, nursing a soda, watching the scene unfold. It felt good, but I wasn't here to celebrate. My work wasn't done. Karen was gone, her house a dark shell at the end of the cul-de-sac. Word spread she'd fled to her sisters in Colorado, though no one knew for sure. Her lawn, once a shrine to HOA perfection, was growing wild, crabgrass creeping over the edges of her pristine flower beds. Neighbors passed it with smirks or whispers, some joking about the router queen who'd thought she could control their lives. Her mailbox overflowed with uncollected flyers, a fitting epitaph for her campaign. But I didn't smirk. Karen's fall was a victory, but it was only the first shot in a bigger war. HomeSphere was still out there, their servers compromised by my worm, but their operation far from dead. And someone had fed Karen that heat cutter, pointed her at my cable, turned her into a pawn or a weapon. I'd exposed her, but the strings she danced on were still attached to something bigger, something I hadn't fully traced. I walked home that night, the stars bright above Willow Creek's quiet streets. My phone pinged with a secure message from FBI headquarters. The data I'd pulled from HomeSphere's servers had landed hard. Logs were archived, admins identified, and a federal warning had been issued for compliance violations. The Bureau was moving, quietly, efficiently, building a case that could dismantle HomeSphere's suburban empire. But the final sweep from my honeypot revealed something uglier. Karen had linked Willow Creek to a mesh network spanning 15 HO-governed suburbs across the state. Some were still active, others paused, waiting for the scandal to fade so HomeSphere could slink back in. They thought public outrage would die down, that people would forget. They didn't know me. I'd sent a full report to the Bureau's cybercrime division, urging them to escalate beyond Karen, beyond HomeSphere, into the municipalities that had let private firms infiltrate residential governance. This wasn't just a neighborhood scandal. It was a systemic heist, and I wasn't letting it go. Back in my garage, the mobile uplink hummed, its green light a steady pulse in the dark. I'd kept it online, not because I expected HomeSphere to strike again, but because peace was fragile. Willow Creek was healing. Neighbors waved now, stopped to chat as I walked my dog, their eyes no longer darting nervously toward Karen's old booth. Mrs. Cruz brought me banana bread, still warm from the oven, with a shy "thank you, Lucas" that said more than words. Greg asked me to check his new router, half joking about keeping the router queen away. It was a quiet gratitude, the kind that didn't need speeches or medals. I'd protected them when no one else would, and they knew it, even if they didn't know the half of it. I was still Lucas the IT contractor, not Lucas the federal agent, and that was fine by me. My job was to catch problems before they exploded, and this one had been diffused, just barely. But I wasn't naive. Karen's fall had rattled the cage, and whoever was behind HomeSphere wouldn't sit idle. I'd built a new tool for the neighborhood, a simple network scanner app called Digital Doorbell. It let residents see what devices were talking to what, user-friendly enough for Lorraine to take credit when she announced it as a community safety feature. They loved it, downloading it onto their phones, checking their routers with a mix of curiosity and relief. I'd open-sourced the code, stripped it of any backdoors, and hosted it on a secure server. It wasn't a trap like the honeypot. It was a shield, a way to keep Willow Creek's signals clean without Karen's iron fist. Lorraine beamed at the potluck, calling it our little victory, and I let her. Recognition wasn't my thing. Results were. Then one morning, a letter arrived. Handwritten, no return address, just a plain envelope slipped into my mailbox. Inside was a photo of Karen, standing beside a man in a HomeSphere polo shirt, both holding a plaque. The date was 2 years old, the caption scribbled on the back, Pilot Program Coordinators, Smart Suburb Initiative. My blood ran cold. Karen had known, maybe not everything, but enough to accept a plaque, enough to lie. The handwriting wasn't hers, likely from an insider who wanted the truth out but couldn't go public. I scanned the image, added it to my evidence locker, and burned the original in my fireplace. Not to erase it, but because it had served its purpose. Karen's story was the front page, but the real fight was in courtrooms, federal oversight meetings, and the server logs of companies that thought suburbia was a blind spot. I stood on my back deck that night, a beer in hand, staring out at the neighborhood. Porch lights glowed, dogs barked in the distance, sprinklers ticked on with digital precision. It looked the same as it always had, but everything had changed. The watchers had been caught, their illusion shattered. Karen would never touch another cable, and HomeSphere was on the ropes, their suburban dreams crumbling under the weight of my worm. But the photo nagged at me. Someone had sent it, someone who knew more than they could say. The mesh network's reach, 15 suburbs, maybe more, hinted at a larger player, a shadow behind HomeSphere's shadow. I'd flagged it for the Bureau, and a task force was already auditing HOA vendor contracts in 3 states. Quietly, legally, relentlessly. My kind of fight. The neighborhood had changed too, in ways that went beyond tech. People smiled more, lingered on sidewalks, stopped pretending they hadn't seen Karen's tyranny. They'd noticed the blinking routers, the flickering smart lights, the thermostats acting up at midnight. They just hadn't known what to do until someone, me, connected the dots. I thought of the little girl on her pink bike, training wheels clacking as she rode past my driveway. "Thanks for getting rid of the weird cameras," she'd shouted, wobbling away. No one had told her about HomeSphere or the scans, but she'd felt it, the way kids always do when something's off. Her thumbs up was better than any medal, a reminder why I did this, not for glory, but for the quiet moments when a neighborhood could breathe again. A secure message lit up my terminal the next evening, offering a new assignment. Another suburb, another smart pilot, this time a fence system flagging unusual signal behaviors. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a challenge. Part of me wanted to dive in, chase the next shadow, burn another network to the ground. But I powered down the terminal and poured myself a bourbon. Willow Creek had earned its peace, and I wasn't ready to leave it yet. Let someone younger, hungrier, take the next case. I'd done my part, and for now, I wanted to savor the quiet. My toolkit stayed close, though, the relay van tuned, the drift wire sweet on standby, my ears always open. Karen had taught me that tyranny doesn't always come with jackboots. Sometimes it wears a sun hat and a laminated badge, preaching harmony while selling your secrets. And when it knocks again, I'll be ready. I stepped outside, the bourbon's warmth lingering as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the cul-de-sac. My lawn was finally looking decent, new hedges planted where Karen's shovel had torn up my cable. I grabbed the hose, letting the water arc lazily over the grass, and thought about the photo, the plaque, the handwritten note. Someone out there was watching, waiting for the heat to die down. They'd miscalculated. People aren't as blind as corporations think. They see the glitches, feel the intrusion, and when pushed, they push back. Willow Creek had, and so had I. The fight wasn't over, but for now the signal was clear, the neighborhood was ours, and the stars above were brighter for it. So here's the truth. The kind you don't find in HOA newsletters or corporate press releases. The watchers are always out there, hiding behind buzzwords and promises, betting you won't notice. But you do. And when you do, there's someone like me, quiet, stubborn, relentless, ready to tear their game apart. Karen thought she was untouchable. HomeSphere thought they were invisible, but they forgot the first rule of suburbia: never underestimate the guy next door. He might just be the one who's been watching all along, and when he strikes, he doesn't miss. So raise a glass to the quiet victories, the ones that keep the lights on and the shadows at bay. Because in this neighborhood, and everyone like it, the real fight never ends. It just waits for the next cable to cut and the next hero to rise.